This is episode 338 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am very pleased to be joined this week by Rob Nikolewski. He is a reporter at the San Diego Union-Tribune, a former employee of the Rio Grande Foundation as a reporter in Santa Fe and Capital, and all around good guy. So welcome back, Rob Nikolewski.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to be back.
No problem. And just as a starting point, can you talk about how people can find you at the San Diego Union-Tribune, your stories on social media and in general?
Yeah, I'm the energy reporter for the last 5 years for the San Diego Union-Tribune. You can go to SanDiegoUnionTribune.com and check out my stories, and as well as all the other stories that my colleagues are writing at the Union-Tribune. We've had a lot of busy things going on in California, not just on the energy front, but on many other fronts as well. So check us out. We need every eyeball we can, like every other newspaper in the country. It's kind of a tough economic situation out there. So anyone who can help us out would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah. And, Rob, I guess I'll update you on a story you probably haven't heard yet, but it just came down within the last 24 hours. And you had done some work on Representative Sheryl Williams-Stapleton during your time in New Mexico. She is facing 26 felony charges on everything from racketeering to money laundering, having stolen somewhere in excess of $5 million. Now, I know you dealt with Stapleton in the legislature, but the story that was most notable in its recent application was you called out monuments to me, and you called them out all across the state, a lot of different people, but Stapleton's name is attached and continues to be attached, so far as I know, to a facility, the African American Performing Arts Pavilion at the state fairgrounds. Any thoughts on that old New Mexico story before we move on to California in your latest work?
I remember that story. I remember I wrote about Representative Stapleton. I also wrote about the late Ben Lujan, who had a gymnasium out north of Santa Fe that was named after him. And that was ironically, or maybe not so ironically, that was used as a polling place in which if you were going to vote for, and included in the ballot was whether or not you were going to vote for Ben Lujan. So that was, I remember those stories very well, because, and the thought was that, how appropriate is it for public facilities to be named after living and sometimes serving political figures? Bill Richardson, when I moved to New Mexico in 2010, it was near the end of Bill Richardson's term, and there was I believe like a hospital in the Albuquerque area, or at least a wing to a hospital that's named after him and his wife. So yes, I think that story got a lot of traction, and I think Mark Boitano introduced a couple of pieces of legislature based on those stories. It never got anywhere, but that we got some mileage out of that story.
Yeah, well, we're going to be trying to get some of those bills introduced, and this is certainly a major scandal by New Mexico standards. And she was second in command. She'd moved up. She'd been in the legislature for quite a while, and so was the floor leader for the Democrat majority in the House, and this was a big deal. But also a big deal, like that transition there. Also a big deal is the recently completed, as of last Tuesday, recall election in which Gavin Newsom managed to win. Not pretty convincing return in terms of his people voting for him again. Rob, I know politics writ large isn't your topic of prime work, but as a Californian and just as somebody who follows the political process, what did you pick up on with regard to Gavin Newsom?
Well, it was pretty overwhelming. It was 63.7, I think, was the last percentage I saw of no votes, which, when you think about it, it's not that surprising because of the overwhelming number of Democrats who outnumber Republicans in California. In fact, in California, Republicans are not the second or the number two party, they're the number three party. There are more people who are independent or declined to state than there are registered Republicans. So it didn't surprise me that much. I was surprised by a little bit by the margin of the no vote. But I think just, from a political standpoint, from analyzing it, I think that this is a real tough time and in a time for Republicans in California to figure out where they're at. And I think that California is kind of like the nation as a whole when it comes to Republicans. Is that you've got a faction of Republicans who are very loyal to Donald Trump. Then you have your more libertarian or your more maybe Rockefeller Republicans, and there's a real schism within the Republican Party. So when you look at it from that perspective, I guess it's not that surprising that the recall was defeated as much as it was. Gavin Newsom may not be that popular a candidate, but I think that it's pretty obvious in recent elections, and it was even more pronounced on last Tuesday, that Republicans have a really tough road to hoe in California. Their political popularity is pretty low, and I don't know what direction they can go right now at this point. But I'm the energy guy, so I don't know. I don't follow politics as much as I used to, as I did back in New Mexico. But
sure.
That's sort of my my analysis of that.
Well, before we move on totally from that subject, now this recall election is, kind of an additional election. So when will Newsom be up for election again?
He'll be up for election next year. And I think that was another reason why I think the no vote won so convincingly, because I think a lot of people felt that, well, even though Gavin Newsom may not be doing that great a job and he may not be that popular, there didn't seem to be any specific, really egregious violation that he made as governor. I mean, you could argue that he's not a very good governor, and some people would argue that he is a good governor. But if people are making the argument that, oh, Gavin Newsom's not a very good governor, well, I think that it's difficult to argue, well, let's recall him when next year he's up for re-election. And even though he may not, maybe he has done a few things that didn't sit well with very many people, there doesn't seem to be like an impeachable offense out there. So I think those are some of the reasons. And ironically, I think a number of the Republicans who pushed for this recall, this may end up blowing up in their face, because there is such an overwhelming majority of Democrats in the state legislature. Now there's talk, and it might be a lot more than talk, about changing the recall rules and making it much more difficult to recall a sitting governor or a sitting member of the legislature after this. So I think I don't see how this ended up redounding to the benefit of the state Republican Party.
Yeah, and as somebody who, just taking partisan politics out of it, I'm not a big fan of the perpetual election.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of Newsom, as you might imagine, either. But the idea that you would have somebody survive a recall election, and the good thing, I guess, about these recalls is that the campaign is so compressed relative to others, but you have the collection of the signatures, which takes a long time. And of course, it's in California, which, California sneezes and the national media are there to cover it, whereas New Mexico could have terminal brain cancer and nobody really cares because we have a little over 2 million people and you all have, I don't know,
Right.
40,
When New
54
Mexico's
million.
got what, like 5 electoral votes?
Yeah, no. So California is a much bigger deal electorally, although it's gone blue. New Mexico has gone blue and arguably been blue even much longer than California. Although maybe California is a deeper shade of blue these days. But it does seem odd that you have somebody go through this electoral process and then have to come right back at it because
Yeah,
you know,
next November of
yeah.
2022. That's when he'll run for re-election.
So I guess last question on this. Is your assumption that Larry Elder would be the front runner among the Republicans? Is that kind of, I'm not expecting you to have insider information, but I mean, Elder seemed to be the front runner. He also seemed to be the foil or the tool that the Democrats used to defend against the recall because Donald Trump still looms large in American politics, and California, to say the least, is not Trump country. I think that's the understatement of the century. But Larry Elder, for better or for worse, kind of wound up being seen as the Trump guy. But there were other prominent political leaders, and even Caitlyn Jenner was at least looking, considered in a race. I don't know if she has a political future or what, but just ballpark it for me. Who do you think is going to run for the Republicans before we move on in that race?
Yeah, I would think that Larry Elder is probably the de facto choice. But then you go back to what we were talking about earlier. It's sort of like you're the de facto choice of 30% of the voting populace. That's not going to get you over the top, and that's the real question Republicans have. And Kevin Faulconer, who was a former mayor of San Diego, he did not do very well. I think he finished third. I think he got about 7% of the vote. And there were some people in the Republican Party that were thinking, oh, okay, Faulconer, because Faulconer is not a rock-ribbed conservative. He distanced himself from Trump. So there were some thinking among political people that, oh, maybe Faulconer is this guy who might be able to bridge that gap and bring Republicans and bring in some disaffected Democrats. But he didn't do very well. So I think you come back to it. I don't think that California can be written off if you're a Republican or a conservative, because when you look at a state like Massachusetts, which is also very blue, but they've got a Republican governor. They had Mitt Romney, who was a Republican governor. But right now, I think with that Trump equation out there, I don't know in a state like California if a Republican can garner enough broad-based support to get to 50.1% of the vote. But
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I agree. That seems like a pretty steep hill to climb, but we've got our own governor election here in New Mexico in 2022, and we have plenty of issues, and New Mexico in many ways seems to pride itself, at least the ascendant Democrats, as being the California of the Mountain West, except for all those tech companies and all the money that they generate. But on electricity, which is right there in your wheelhouse, recently, Gavin Newsom, the governor, announced that there was going to be 5 natural gas power plants constructed in various places around California in order to address brownouts and blackouts. Now, before we talk about them specifically, how did the summer go? I know it's been hot. We're kind of in a drought all over the West. What's kind of the broad situation in terms of the electrical grid out there in California at this time?
Well, we're not out of the woods yet, because even though it's September 21st, which I guess makes it the first day of autumn. But California is an interesting state for a number of reasons, but also it's an interesting state weather-wise, because late September, all of October, those are months where you're not out of the woods when you're talking about wildfires. And if you're talking about wildfires, you're not out of the woods when you're talking about potential brownouts, blackouts, rotating outages. And so even though it's been a hot summer and we haven't had very much rainfall, I wrote a story along with one of my colleagues here about wildfires in California just a couple of weeks ago. And the story, the thrust of the story was, it's very dry out there. We could be in for another 6 to 8 weeks of being on pins and needles about possible wildfires. But by the same token, a number of different entities, including the Scripps Oceanography Institute, a number of the utilities, including San Diego Gas and Electric, they've done a lot more work in the last few years about getting data on wildfires and being able to mitigate wildfires. So even though in Northern California, we in California have had lots of trouble and lots of deadly wildfires, we've had a few in the LA area, but here in San Diego, we haven't had any devastating wildfires in San Diego since 2007. So that's what, 14 years? And a big reason why is because we've been able to get more data. But having said all that, yes, there still is. We've had 8 what we call flex alerts, and those are statewide alerts that the California grid operator sends out to consumers saying, please conserve energy between the hours, usually it's 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. And we've had 8 of those this year, which is, I think, 3 or 4 more than we had all of last year. And last year we had a pair of rotating outages, statewide outages. We have not had any rotating outages so far this year, but as I said before, we're not out of the woods yet.
Well, is the primary issue with the electricity grid the wildfires, and is that when lines go down, they cause the fires, and that's how things circle out of control? What kind of talk about the connection between the wildfires and the electrical grid itself?
It's all sort of interconnected. The wildfires per se do not lead to rotating outages. The rotating outages, if we have them like we did last year, what ends up, the big issue is that here in California, and lots of other states, New Mexico, are following the same path. We depend a lot on renewable resources like solar and wind. Solar and wind, in fact, we get so much solar in California, we have to give it away during the day. It's so abundant. The problem with solar and wind is that they are intermittent sources. Yes, they are clean sources, but they are intermittent sources. And that means that when the wind doesn't blow and the sun's not shining, you're not able to generate that. Now you can say, okay, how do we make up for that? You can fill the gaps in with natural gas, but natural gas is a fossil fuel. In California, by the year 2045, wants to derive 100% of its electricity from carbon-free sources.
Hold on that. Just, you said 2025?
I'm sorry, 2045. Thank you.
2045? Okay. So you're, just to kind of take a step back, that is the same time frame that New Mexico is on. And so that's why I kind of conflated the two, because New Mexico's Energy Transition Act is supposed to be zero carbon. Now, I want to make sure on this. Is it zero carbon? So therefore nuclear is allowed under California?
That's a very good distinction, Paul, that very few people notice.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yes. The goal in California is to be carbon free by 2045, and to go I think it's 80% or 60% renewable by 2035. So there's a difference there. And that's a very good distinction that you make. Renewables means wind, solar, et cetera. Carbon free, they gave themselves a little bit of wiggle room there. That means they can use hydro, which hydro is carbon free. Some environmentalists don't like hydro. They want to take down all the dams and let the rivers run free. But hydro is carbon free. Now, you mentioned nuclear. Yes, technically, and I guess theoretically, you could use nuclear, but here in California, we only have one nuclear power plant that is still operational right now, and that is the Diablo Canyon nuclear facility in San Luis Obispo. But that is slated to go offline in the year in 3 years. The first 2024, I believe, and 2025, it'll be completely off the grid. So we lose 2,400 megawatts per day, right when Diablo closes down. And so the state has been scrambling and trying to find ways to make up for that. In fact, I'm writing a story today about a pumped hydro project here in San Diego that hopes to be up and running by 2030. That will add about 500 megawatts. But that's going to be a very significant issue. If in 3 years, when Diablo Canyon goes offline, if California can find enough megawatts to make up for that loss of Diablo Canyon, and secondly, even if they make up for the megawatts, can they do it affordably? And that is related to what you mentioned about the natural gas plants, where they were going to shut down a number of natural gas plants. They decided last month, the state did, to keep these natural gas plants open, because 5 natural gas plants open, because they want to make sure that we have enough megawattage out there to avoid rolling blackouts. Because, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the recall effort, that was one wild card during the recall that I was thinking as an energy reporter. I was thinking, if we have another set of rolling blackouts this summer before the recall election, that's going to really hurt Gavin Newsom.
That's what undermined Gray Davis way back in the day,
precisely,
the last recall effort, as I recall.
The Gray Davis was recalled as governor and replaced by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the big issue was rolling blackouts. And that's what's interesting, is that I think politics, to a large extent, goes out the window when people are not able to turn on their air conditioner when it's really hot, turn on their lights when needed to.
Now, I may have misread these articles. I may not understand California and its situation electricity wise, but the understanding I had from the article that I read about California's plans with the natural gas plants is that they were somehow building new natural gas facilities at a cost of $171.5 million per. Am I missing something? It sounded like they were temporary. Is that reopening costs? I don't know. Tell me a little bit more about these natural gas plants.
Yeah, they're going to open 5 natural gas plants to avoid blackouts, but also there were a number of natural gas plants in the LA area that, in addition to that the state and the California Public Utilities Commission in conjunction with the governor's office, they decided not to close down those.
I see.
Those facilities.
So you've got 5 that are staying open that were slated to be shut down, and 5 new facilities that are going to be constructed, presumably ASAP, right?
Right. That's what I've heard. That the
the
California Department of Water Sources is in the process of procuring 5 temporary gas fueled generators that have additional capacities of 30 megawatts. So yeah, I mean, that's in the short answer is that California wants to be able to make sure that we can keep the lights on. And that's especially going to be an issue, as I said, in the next 3 years when Diablo. Now, maybe battery storage can be the savior. But right now, as we speak now, battery storage is more expensive than natural gas. And another possible savior for natural gas is, and you've seen this more in Europe than in the United States, but it's starting to be more of a movement. If you can inject hydrogen into natural gas, that allows the natural gas to burn much more cleanly. So that might be a savior for natural gas. But but the hydrogen situation is still kind of up in the air. San Diego Gas and Electric, for example, since they've got San Diego Gas, they've got gas in their name, so they've got a built-in incentive to try to make this work. But they are experimenting with injecting hydrogen into the natural gas lines. But there's still some question about whether that will work. There's some question about whether if you inject hydrogen into gas lines, that maybe it makes the gas lines brittle. So there's a lot of moving parts about this. And in many ways, I mean, it's a cliche that California kind of is the bellwether for the rest of the country. But in many ways, when it comes to energy, that's very much the case. The talk about hydrogen, the talk about battery storage, the talk about all the microgrids and things like that, that's sort of what California is tackling right now. And if they don't tackle it, then there's going to be some real questions.
Well, gosh, there's so many different questions I could ask you, but you did bring something up. What was that? California Gas and Electric, PG&E? Who are you referring to there? I'm sorry.
San Diego Gas.
San Diego. I mean, most companies, as I have grown up, they always have the gas and electric kind of paired together, and the gas has always been, and P&M used to be natural gas and electric, and then they sold off their natural gas holdings. But we did some work, and there's conversations going on in Washington as we speak, led by often Martin Heinrich, our senior state senator, over pushing natural gas to the side as it pertains to home heating and all kinds of other uses. That's something that's pretty far down the tracks in California. Have you done any reporting on that? Is that something that you kind of have seen unfold?
That has mostly been concentrated in Northern California, but oddly enough, there's going to be a news conference tomorrow in which a couple of politicians from Encinitas, which is in the San Diego County area, are talking about introducing a bill in Encinitas that would move, I want to make sure that I've got this correct. They want to move to all electric. Let's see here. Yeah, the region's first comprehensive building electrification ordinance. An ordinance that will require building electrification in the city of Encinitas. So that's really that's sort of like the first time I've seen that here in San Diego, but it doesn't surprise me because that's been a movement, because this idea of we need to electrify everything. Now, a number of environmentalists are in favor of that, saying that because of of climate change, we need to electrify everything. But there's also some concern that if we electrify everything, we're putting all of our energy eggs, so to speak, in one basket. And if we did have any outages, rotating outages, well, then if you don't have electricity, then you can't charge your electric vehicle. Your electric stove wouldn't be able to work, whereas your gas stove would. So it's in fact, it's some of the issues that came up when they had the big Texas freeze in February.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the interesting things about covering the energy beat as I do, is that there's all these ripple effects. And there's all this, well, yeah, if we do this, but if we do that, if you're going to change and remake our electrical system, which is what California and other states are doing, and you could argue that they need to do, there are ramifications there. I'll say that.
Yeah, well, I have done some work myself on this issue because, like I said, Heinrich is a ringleader in Congress trying to leverage federal dollars, not to ban at this point directly. The federal government really doesn't have that power, I don't think, to ban natural gas stoves and heating and whatnot. But I did a fair amount of research on pieces that ran in Albuquerque, Santa Fe, and also national review websites and those papers as well, and generated quite a bit of attention. Heinrich himself called me out in an op-ed in the first sentence, and I definitely am interested to see how things develop out there because, pushing electrification in a state with an already shaky grid and electrical supply, it seems like a very dubious proposition here in New Mexico. And I know you haven't been here for some time, but San Juan Generating Station is going to be shut down next June, and PNM is already preparing folks for brownouts and blackouts. So we have potentially a coal-fired power plant in an election year, I might add, so June of 2022, where the governor is up for re-election in November. It may be something that she wants to keep that station open. But so
here in California, we don't. There's practically no coal-fired generation.
Yep. And I looked at that report. I hope you've at least had the time to check it out. And we're going to have to go in just a second, but it was from chooseenergy.com. I'm sure you're probably familiar with that information, but what struck me about it, and we'll kind of leave it after this, is the small amount of electricity generated in California, 18,461 megawatts, with Texas as 46,245 megawatts. That study looked at where it was produced as opposed to where it was used, but California must be importing quite a bit of electricity. I presume they're trying to make that so-called renewable electricity, but I don't know. Talk about the importing of electricity into California and how big of a deal that is.
California imports about 25% of its energy on a given day, especially during the summertime. And that's one of the reasons. There were many reasons why we had rotating outages last August. And one of the reasons why was because the state was not able to get that 25% of imported energy from other states, because there was not just a terrible heat wave that was centered and sitting over California, it also sat over Arizona, Washington, Oregon, parts of Idaho, parts of Utah, these other neighboring states. So when California said, hey, we need some electricity, and that's one thing that I think that the average person doesn't know about electricity. Electricity has to be used at the moment you've got it. It's not like you can save it up. It's it's used and expended at that moment. And that's why you have balancing authorities. That's why they're called balancing authorities. You have to meet the demand and the supply at that same moment. And last year, one of the reasons why California found itself in a real bind was because that amount of energy that they normally got from other states, they were not able to get. And that brings up a larger question too, because if other states, neighboring states, are also going to be following the same sort of energy policies as California, that begs the question, well, will other states be able to, are other states going to be in the same sort of boat where they won't be able to generate as much electricity and they'll be more reliant on other states? And that brings up a larger question about, do we need a transmission system and a grid system that is regionalized and where it's easier for states to swap energy and at times when they've got an abundance and another state might be in search of that. So all that brings up large questions. And as I said before, I think that a lot of this discussion is theoretical, but when the lights go off, it's not theoretical anymore.
All right. Well, Rob, it sounds like you have a similar crime problem to what we have here in New Mexico, somewhere by your apartment over there. I hear, I hope those are ambulances. Maybe you live by the hospital.
I'm on a busy street next to the hospital.
I'm just giving you a hard time. But thanks for coming on today. And we're going to have to leave it there. Again, if you want to find Rob's reporting, go to the San Diego Union-Tribune site, as well as, how do people find you on Twitter again, Rob?
I'm at Rob Nikolewski, and that's ROBNIKOLEWSKI.
All right. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to this show at Apple, Stitcher, or have your Google Home play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.